Hi everyone, I'm Kaius with a K, and like most people who spend way too much of their free time on the internet, I have a pretty strong attachment to the concept of lost media. The concept of media that is lost to time and is no longer accessible in any format that can be easily located has an inherent intrinsic allure and mystique to it. Does this even qualify as a real Halloween video? Almost certainly not, but I've been wanting to do one of these for Halloween for a few years now, so fuck it! You'd think a genre like fighting games with their abundant documentation and consistent preservational efforts wouldn't encounter the issue of lost media slipping through the cracks as much as other genres, but you're watching a video essay about lost media in fighting games, so to be fair, this isn't specifically lost fighting games. I'm also going to cover some found media to balance out all the doom and gloom of some stuff being lost forever. Plus, you know, some games being found now doesn't mean they aren't interesting to talk about. And to be honest, I did want to cover some scrapped content such as DLC characters and the like, since while it's not technically lost media, I believe it pertains to the interests of the kind of people who would watch a video like this in the first place. But honestly, the script is just fine without it, so I'll probably cover that in another video. A really obvious starting point for this conversation is Dragon King the fighting game. Dragon King was a game primarily developed by Masahiro Sakurai and Satoru Iwata for the Nintendo 64, which was made specifically to make use of the system's joystick in a unique, novel way and in a multiplayer environment. It was to be a 4-player fighting game where the goal was to knock your opponents out of the screen. Sakurai felt that Dragon King lacked the atmosphere that many home console fighting games had at the time due to a lack of diversity in its roster, and it was suggested by a co-worker at HAL Laboratory that adding elements from existing Nintendo properties for marketing purposes would give the IP an edge. This would lead to Dragon King transforming into Super Smash Bros. Oh god, that's 3 videos in a row. I've mentioned that series now. Along with the aesthetic of the game being completely changed to be Nintendo themed, the original character's comparatively small moveset was chopped up and given to other playable characters, mostly Captain Falcon. Sakurai has shown off footage of the game of his own volition a few times in the past, but unfortunately there's been no public release or ROM upload of this prototype, which means it's still technically lost. This footage of course can be found on Sakurai's channel, which he will unfortunately no longer be uploading on. It's a real shame because he quit YouTube before he could get to collab with me. Well, guess this is as good a time as any to shoot my shot. Sakurai-san, itsu demo higaru ni go renraku kudasai. Anata to issho ni hatarakeru koto o tanoshimi ni shitaimasu. So, haite mo amari nihongo ga jouzu de wa nakute. With that second language e-beg out the way, let's talk about NetFighter, a 1998 fighting game by Segasoft that based itself in Sega's proprietary server browser Heat.net. If you don't know what Heat.net was, it was basically like GameSpy. And if you don't know what GameSpy was... Oh jeez. I don't feel like answering that question. Basically, it was the basis for the Wii and DS online services and like the entire reason those things shut down. Anyway, NetFighter takes place in the not so distant future where society fucking sucks and prisoners are so copious in number that they're sent to some cyber world. And there's an underground fighting ring in the cyber world whose combatants are named NetFighters. There's probably also some unseen cultish force manipulating them, but this is, of course, never elaborated on. NetFighter was a cutting-edge fighting game that boasted some real state-of-the-art, technically marvelous features, like practice mode, player versus CPU, and even 2 whole women. These are actual bullet points listed on their product info page, and it's not even accurate because there's actually a 3rd woman. Speaking of characters, there are 8, and they're all weird and look stupid. You've got Freak, the fast guy, Khan, the strong guy, and of course, you have Ripper, who is balanced. Most of these characters have cybernetic enhancements, and those who don't are named Fleshers, because they made up a slur for their fighting game. Huh. Aesthetically speaking, the game is your typical mid to late 90s MK wannabe schlock, and I hate to say that so flippantly, but just look at it. The edgy, bloody aesthetic, the drab world where everything and everyone sucks. Even the logo has Ripper and her bloody balanced claws popping out at you. Due to the existence of a sampler DVD, we actually do have a little bit of footage for the game. Unfortunately, the footage looks like shit, but there was also an exe installer that the game came with which was downloadable from the Heat.net site. If anyone happens to have an old hard drive or floppy disk with this on it, you're literally sitting on lost media and you have the power to end a lost media search that fucking only I care about. While we're talking about blood-filled netplay-driven games, how about WaveNet MK3? This was a unique and elusive version of Mortal Kombat 3 that, as the name implies, had online matchmaking. In its short lifespan, it not only had online services for MK3, but UMK3 as well, and even had its own revision of the latter. Due to the game being lost, this revision itself is completely lost, but apparently it patched out some of the scummier shit like Striker's Gunfinite. Also in the MK3 version of this edition was a playable version of the big-ass bald-ass noob Cyball I talked about in my last video, which you should also go watch if you haven't yet because it's really good. It's also worth noting that very little is actually known about this version of MK3 because there's no ROM dump online, and as you'd probably expect from the average arcade collector, the few people purported to own this aren't interested in dumping it because the value of their collector's item that barely even works online is more important to them than the preservation of media. Go figure. On a lighter note, let's talk about Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. I talk about this game a lot on my channel, huh? Did you guys know that there was a Sega Mega Drive version of Champion Edition that was in development hell but never released? Apparently Capcom wasn't happy with the way the port was turning out, and after numerous delays decided to quietly cancel it and replace it with Special Champion Edition, which was a compilation of both Champion Edition and the newer Hyper Fighting. Capcom essentially pulled the rug out from under magazines, giving them the final revision of Champion Edition before promptly cancelling it and releasing Special Champion Edition not too long after the original Champion Edition's projected release date. The reviews of Special Champion Edition were more or less identical to the ones originally written up for the originally intended release. Original Champion Edition, Special Champion Edition, Original Champion Edition. Holy fuck, why am I saying so many words? Despite all this, I think that audio-visually the cancelled port is actually better. Special Champion Edition has a much worse audio driver than its contemporary, so the music has a much thinner and wetter sound to it. There's even a fan-made ROM hack by Stephanie Longeville that replaces the audio driver because people really didn't like it that much. Anyway, the Champion Edition port's ROM was found and dumped online in July of 2020 by Hidden Palace and is available pretty easily online. If you have a vested interest in Street Fighter 2's many ports, I highly recommend this one. If nothing else, just for the novelty of its backstory and because Capcom doesn't want you to play it. Cartoon Combat, with a K just like me, is a cancelled fighting game that is very unlikely to ever be publicly accessible. The game was to be developed by American Technos for the Sega Mega Drive, and magazine previews seem to describe it as an adorable game for the younger players, due to its cuddly cartoon animal aesthetic. And the ROM text actually supports this theory, since the roster featured 6 cartoon animal characters across 8 stages in such whimsical cartoon locales like Wild West, Mousehole, and Russia. Unfortunately, the text is all we can extract from the ROM as it's damaged beyond playability. On the off chance someone has another prototype of this lying around, please consider dumping it. It's one of my holy grails of lost media, and I would really like to see some sort of proof that it even exists. I wanted to talk about the cancelled fighting game Dragon's Heaven in this video, and I'm not sure why. There really isn't much to this prototype beyond it just being an interesting look into another potential Neo Geo fighting game. It was developed by Kengo Asai, who previously worked on Gokaiser and The Last Blade, and it definitely looked the part. Unfortunately, the game lacked funding and ceased development twice before finally being unceremoniously cancelled. This game faded into complete obscurity until 2016 when a Neo Geo collector found it on a test board they'd won on an auction. As a development build, it's lacking a lot of visuals, has no title screen, no arcade mode, and most of the characters are missing their sprites. However, a lot of the stages have apparently complete visuals and they honestly look very pretty. The game was also purported to feature a mechanic tied to these stages where a character's lawful chaotic alignment would change over the course of the run, which affected their moveset and made them stronger or weaker based on the time of day the stage had. I would love to see these stages repped and ported to Mugen or something. The developers, Technos Japan, have gone under, so there is very little chance of seeing this concept revived somehow, unless somehow Arc System Works owns the property rights and WayForward wants to make a new game with it or something. Alright, enough stalling, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. The lost fighting game of lost fighting games. The fighting game that the developer wants to make sure stays lost. This game is such a cognito hazard that I'm actively putting this video at risk by even mentioning it by name. And I don't mean the joking kind of cognito hazard. I am of course talking about
Beatboxing Puppy.
No, if you're watching on YouTube, you might notice that I censored that. While I do think that the developer has become a little more receptive of discussion of the game, I'm choosing not to risk my ass more than I should. If you really want to know the names of these things, let's just say people who support the channel will be very delighted. If you don't know what
Beatboxing Puppy
is, which is very likely because this game is the fucking fighting game equivalent of Davy Jones' Locker, it was a 2.5D fighting game inspired by the wave of gratuitously edgy and gory fighting games in the 90s. I obviously can't show footage, but here's my artistic rendition of what the game sorta kinda looked like. It was slated to be released in early 2014, and it was fully released a few months later in May of that year, with physical copies beginning to ship out slowly, though digital versions didn't release until the end of that month, and the authentication process of the game was an adventure all on its own. It was shipped as a .rar file containing a .exe file which contained code that you would email to the developer, and within 48 hours you'd receive your copy, and it's not actually known if anybody received their copy this way. And to be fair, manually handling a process like this instead of automating it is likely to leave a margin of error if you ask me. Apparently the developer, which was a small company, was actively dumping new copies of the game for each of these requests, which does explain why this error margin existed in the first place. Online DRM was also still kind of teething at the time, and believe me, bigger companies were taking stupider measures. This process took so long that players began to doubt that the game even existed. They thought that
Beatboxing Puppy
could have been anything between vaporware to an elaborate scam. Luckily, neither of these were the case. The game did actually end up being playable, even if the amount of people who ordered the game wasn't terribly high. As for the game itself, it was okay. I really like my games being campy and schlocky and ridiculous, and
Beatboxing Puppy
was no exception. However, that's not everybody's cup of tea, so it wasn't received very well. Visually, it looked pretty decent, which is to be expected as the developer has a strong grasp on special and practical effects. But players felt that the gameplay needed some work. The developer's response was, as one would naturally assume, to meticulously scrub all mention of
Beatboxing Puppy
from all corners of the internet. Wait, what? Yeah, so if you Google this game, you'll find very few pages, videos, and images about the game. This is intentional. They straight up ripped as much of the game offline as they could. A certain YouTube Let's Play channel got their hands on the game in 2017, and the video was promptly taken down. The game would luckily be put on the Internet Archive in 2023, and then it would be taken down. The developers were playing the long game with this one. And look, all due respect to the developers, I know they have their rebranded game coming and all, and that they weren't proud of this, but regardless of how you feel about the game, I feel like people should still be allowed to play it, discuss it, and share it. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a bad piece of lost media, and even the work we're not proud of has value and meaning to others. And a world where people are scared to talk about a video game because the mere mention of it invokes legal action is kind of dystopian. Now that I'm off my soapbox, can anyone find a server host for the old M&M site for me? That site's character creator is my personal lost media holy grail. Someone? Anyone? Please? M&Ms? Thank you to Mick, XCat, Penrost, and Phenomenal for supporting me on Patreon. I literally almost forgot to do this. The video was literally just about to render. You can support me on Patreon by going to the link in the description. Okay, now I need to actually render this. Goodbye.